Do you believe that science is going to give us the answers? Why? What is the source of your belief that science is going to give us the answers? Do you think that the human soul is something that can be engineered? Do you trust the science? Or are you more skeptical? Well, you should be, and it's all Newton's fault. It's a good thing we have an ark. So are you ready to go in further than where we've been? We're still talking about the discarded image, but we've mainly made it to like page 10. I think if that far, right? We're trying to get everything, as they say, unpacked and set up. And I realized I was gonna say I don't really recommend the discarded image as an entry into the things that we're doing, precisely because of how much Lewis leaves out in the setup for how hard it is to get back into this discarded image. So that's what we're working on right now. So this is episode 3 of however many it takes.
However many it takes. Yes.
However many it takes.
We'll be here all decade. It's okay.
Well, I found this is yes, we might be. We're going to keep going until we finish writing the poem, and we're only in act 4 of 7. So agree with us. This bookmark was in my book. Life is a treasure hunt. You just need to know where to look. Well, we're on it. Right? It's from Half Price Books, which was one of the Texas half price used booksellers, right? Not Powell's, but half price. So
yeah, that's a chain. I've been to those.
Life is a treasure hunt. We're still in it. And guys, if you're new, if you found us because you're interested in Newton, which we promised to talk about tonight, this is number 3 of the setup of these videos. And you can go back and listen to the first 2 if you want to, or you can just plunge in the middle, because that's basically where we always are, right there in the middle. Here we are. You fell out of the boat. You're in the ocean, and we've sailed along, and we're going to save you. We're throwing life preservers out so that you can figure out where you are. And tonight we want to continue with our problem of like what kind of frame problem we have in order to get back to the point where a lot of this pre-modern imagining of the cosmos actually makes sense. So that have I set it up clearly enough this time? We could talk about the Love Boat again. I mean, I'm gonna,
yes, there's lots of fans out there that want us to talk more about the Love Boat.
We should keep talking about the Love Boat. Yes, life at light. I'm starting to think that stuff is tracking us, right? Because I saw one of the Christian feeds on X saying something like, life isn't a cruise, a pleasure cruise, it's a battleship or something. And I'm like, no, it's a pleasure cruise. We're the pleasure cruise route. So if you want the battleship guys, go somewhere else. We're here to enchant you.
That's an interesting choice of words.
Yeah, well, yes. Okay. Okay, so
that was a clue.
That was a clue. I give clues all the time, and the people say I don't make any sense. I don't understand. This is just it's going to make sense. We promise you. Stick with us. it's going to make sense. But this is a long journey because we are going through centuries and centuries and centuries of what we now have learned to call gaslighting. But tonight we're going to call it hexing, right?
Yes.
Here we are in the
Yes.
magic library. Okay. That's as much introduction as you get tonight. I like those of you who want the
It,
longer, slow introduction, go to the Love Boat episode. That's the
it,
first one.
yeah. Yeah. This is the picture of the Bodleian.
Yes.
Yes, it does look rather like Hogwarts, I gotta say. To an American anyway, because of the portraits on the wall on the sides.
Well, it is Hogwarts. It's the one they used in the movie.
They did? They did. Oh no, they used the
Allegedly,
outside.
no. Well, no. The thing is, I get them. Maybe Oxford needs money, but they've used the Bodleian in a number of movies recently. Definitely in
Okay.
Discovery of Witches, because it's actually set in the Bodleian. And
Yeah,
then there are parts of some of the stuff in the Harry Potter movies where they're in this library.
it is pretty amazing looking.
It's
Every
complete.
time I see it, I feel sad I can't see it in person. Well, oh well.
Don't make me go there and have to brag on it. Anyway, it is
Oh,
it.
go on.
It's a wonderful library. I've worked in it for maybe a few weeks. That I had friends who were postdocs at Oxford, and I went and got to stay in a guest room and work there on. In
Nice.
fact, actually, this is totally topical. One of the manuscripts of the long poem that one day I will finally, get my translation out properly. That was the immediate reason for why I needed to learn how to scan, because it's this 6,000 line poem, which I realized when we finish Draco Alchemicus, it'll be about as long as this poem that I need to translate.
Wow.
And I, it's an early 13th century grammarian's exercise in trying to do the very kind of thing that we're trying to do in Draco Alchemicus, which is make this sort of mythological model for
Mhm.
incorporating the Christian story into the whole of creation.
Yes.
But John of Garland, my medieval poet, does it. His frame is a life of Our Lady, or it's not really a life of Our Lady. It's this encyclopedic demonstration of the way in which she is as the bejeweled bedchamber of the incarnation at the center of everything. Yes, I know it's complicated. Anyway,
Yes,
Draco
it is.
Alchemicus will come out like completely easy by the time, and then you realize why it's well. Anyway, yes, I've worked in the Bodleian before, and it's the same. It's the same library that they use as the setting for the opening and Discovery of Witches, right? Because she finds
Yes, but
her
but everyone,
alchemical manuscript there.
what every woman wants to know is, did Matthew show up while you were there?
Well, not Matthew. But what the thing is, I can confirm. Okay, this is like, okay, so she's distracting me. Look at this. It's like we're gonna end up talking about nothing but fantasy,
All you have to do is show me a picture of the Bodley, and I'm like,
romantasy,
I'm
and we're and
gone.
we're 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 in there with the Empire Lover showing up. Um, for a certain kind of woman who tends to write these sorts of books, yes, this is a very sexy place because I think because you're just
Sexy library.
it's a sexy library because you're surrounded by so much knowledge. Yes, you're surrounded by this promise of a world that you are going to get to imagine yourself into, and particularly this reading room, Duke
Yeah.
Humphreys, is the reading room where at the time I think they've changed the reading room. I'm not positive. I know they've changed the reading room at the British Library. It's no longer obviously in the British Museum. It's in the new building. I'm not
Mhm.
quite sure where the manuscript reading room is in Oxford because I haven't been there in a long time. But this was where you went to get the books that were 1,000 years old, right? And
Yeah,
and
that's pretty cool.
and you're sitting there, and they're the kinds of. And this is the library where Tolkien and Lewis would have worked.
Amazing.
Right, yeah, and
Yeah.
spent a lot of their time there with, some of the same manuscripts that, we use to think about how that Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings or Lewis wrote, the Chronicles of Narnia. And so
Mhm.
you're in this library and it's just the books, the leather, I mean the parchment, the smell of it is all quite evocative
Mhm.
of here I am. It's a portal to this other reality. and
Sounds intoxicating.
it's absolutely intoxicating, and that's why, I mean, for all whatever I think about Deborah Harkness and the silliness of some of the stuff that they get up to in the stories, she nails the feeling of Diana calls up a manuscript, and it opens this adventure to her, right?
Yes.
This alchemical adventure out of the manuscript that she calls
Well,
from the
it's
Ashmole collection.
quite a metaphor. Good grief. Yes, you open a book to a world of adventure.
Right. So, according to Lewis, this is, the medieval model of the universe on which most of our fantasy now rests, was very bookish, right? And we talked last time about how that bookishness is itself a kind of media um, enchantment, similar to what we're in now with the internet, or with the Matrix, right? That you are in a reality that's not simply the incarnate creation. You're in this imaginary world, which the Bodleian with its manuscripts is a really great reminder of. If you live in a bookish world, it has a kind of I mean, it's a powerful imaginary quality because you have to use your imagination to read the books, right? To put
Mhm.
images in your mind in the old Aristotelian sense, and then process them in ways we are rapidly learning the AI can't. However much people
Yes.
may want it to, it's not doing the same thing you are when you're putting images in your mind and working with them and thinking about them. Oh, here's our audience. Hi, Rogue Wave. Thank you for we are happy to be discussing the discarded image. And this is Rogue Wave says the discarded image has its good purposes. It led him to Boethius. And my wife and I originally met in a library. Well, see, guys,
Aw,
this is
that's sweet.
romantasy is at your fingertips in the books. Okay, so we started with that last time. Go back and look at episode 144 if you want to know more about the books, right? But we need to sort of get further, deeper in. Come with us deeper in now. Lewis, Tolkien and Lewis, we recognize. I'm much more of a Tolkien scholar than I'm a Lewis scholar. I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but Lewis was wrong about certain things, or he can make. Tolkien was never wrong. Okay, just saying, right? Tolkien's Catholic. He gets more of it right. One of the things that Lewis should have known better and probably did, and it didn't show up in his lecture notes, was thinking that, having said that this model of the universe is based on books and on trying to make all the books harmonized and things like that, gives the unfortunate implication that medieval intellects and readers, including the ones like Chaucer, who use this medieval model of the universe for their storytelling, didn't make actual observations, right? So if you say, it's a world made entirely by books, it's completely inaccurate to say that does medieval Christians never looked at the stars, right? And
Yeah, do you think he meant that literally though, when he made that statement in the discarded image that their world came from books? I think, or was he just trying to press the point that the books are turtles all the way down, right? A book has a source that has another source that has another source, and in the Middle Ages they loved all of these sources. They loved organizing all of these sources. He couldn't
that's
have
a
been
fair
unaware of
reading.
the.
That is a fair. I mean, the thing is, Lewis loved astronomy himself, right? He had his own telescope.
So
He
he
d-
had to
he
know they
he
were,
he did
yeah.
his own observations, and we know, for example, that Chaucer, who is one of these literary fellows, who Lewis also says, look, the model that we're talking about is mainly useful for students of literature because it's where you're going to find it in its sort of most
Mm,
resonant
right,
form, right? The sort
right.
of Dante and Chaucer and stuff like that. Well, Chaucer, we know, could actually use an astrolabe to track motions of the planets and such, because he wrote a handbook for his son.
Oh,
He has
that's neat.
his 9-year-old son. He wrote a how to use your astrolabe handbook. It's like,
Hmm.
dads, you're writing your instructions on, I don't know how to code. I'm not sure, right? But Chaucer wrote a handbook on how to use an astrolabe for his child. So we know that the guys like our poets would also have the access to the observational technology and know how to operate it, much as Lewis himself did, right? He had a telescope, he watched,
Right.
he did the observations. So it's misleading to think, which Casey quite rightly is suggesting maybe that's not what Lewis meant, but anyway, it's misleading if you get the idea from Lewis saying it's a bookish culture that they didn't also make observations. I mean, one of the things that we talked about this time last year was this exhibit that I went to see in Los Angeles at the Getty, where they were showing not only the astrolabes, the actual astrolabes that people had in the later Middle Ages, but also books and books and books of all the calculations that they were doing. We know that, by the later Middle Ages, their stargazing is technically incredibly accurate and fairly detailed, which is how you end up in the 16th and 17th centuries with the guys being able to like remodel everything, because the Europeans have been practicing doing these observations for a very long time, so they know how to do it.
Hmm. Right.
It
So that's what makes me think he was focused mostly on, like you said, the literary world, not
yes,
literally.
well,
Yeah.
and he does admit that the philosophers, they call themselves philosophers this time, natural philosophers, right? Because they're studying the created
Yeah,
cosmos.
they're contemplating it. Yeah.
Even the term nature is a complicated one. Maybe we'll do an episode on that. Um, but that science, this, we don't have scientists. The natural philosophers themselves recognize that the model they're working with um, is subject to revision. Right? It's not like
Hmm.
Copernicus and Galileo came out of nowhere. That they have, they're standing on the shoulders of centuries and centuries of speculation and thought. And so even in the Middle Ages, when they have this model that we're trying to not get to yet, um, they also have a good deal of observational practice. So it's
Hmm.
not solely bookish. So why do we think that they only get it from books? Because we get their sense of a thing from a book, most notably Paradise Lost. Right? And this is I'm teaching a class on campus this autumn on studying medieval history, and so one of the things that we're going to start with is the fictional versions of the Middle Ages that most people have in their heads and don't realize. So like Walter Scott's Ivanhoe and Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee and Victor Hugo's Notre Dame. There's one other. Oh yeah, T.H. White's Once and Future King, right? And if you read these, incredibly well crafted stories, and they tell you things, based on what seems to be like intimate knowledge of the culture that they're referring to, you can be absolutely convinced that they are accurate in their representations of this previous period. And this is because Milton is a great poet, writes an iambic pentameter just like us, but he does it in blank verse rather than stanzas like we were doing.
Hmm.
He creates the impression in this great conversation that Adam is having with the angel Raphael, that the philosophers in their studies of the heavens are doing something completely silly. And of course, what in the in you know the in context of the conversation that Raphael is having with Adam, this is before the fall, right? It's also before the
Hmm.
creation of Eve, which is why Adam's talking to Raphael, not Eve, right? Because and the angel is there, sort of. Adam is thinking about all of the wonderful things that he's seen in creation, and Raphael is basically telling him, "Don't bother trying to understand it." God laughs at the philosophers who try to figure out all of this stuff, right? And particularly um, he says, sorry, I can't. Yeah, which of the glasses? I can't see anything. Um, God is left. He his fabric of the heaven hath left to their disputes, perhaps to move his laughter at their quaint opinions. Wide hereafter, when they come to model heaven and calculate the stars, how they will wield the mighty frame, how build, unbuild, contrive to save appearances. How gird the
Uh,
sphere with centric and eccentric scribed, or um, cycle and epicycle, orb and orb. Now that is in the poem when Raphael is talking to Abba, meant to sound ridiculous, right? God laughs at these natural philosophers who, try with their savings of appearances, to, and adding their centrics and equicentrics and epicycles and everything to make sense of the magnificence of this creation. Milton's point is it's a waste of time. How
Yeah.
silly they are to try. And of course, following on that, by the the 19th century, this is a 19th century diagram of these epicycles, how ridiculous they were. That's why we think now that, oh my gosh, they're just, and Lewis actually says this in Discarded Image, that remember that all of this modeling and the epicycles and everything they're doing, it was all meant to save the appearances. And I realized to look at Milton because Lewis told me to.
Now, what does that mean, to save the appearances? What did he mean, Milton, when he wrote that?
Okay, so when Lewis is talk about the books upon books, right?
Yes,
in order
more
to
turtles.
figure right, just like which particular frame your imagination is buried in, right? Here we are trying to get through the epicycles of the books. So Lewis is trying to contrast the literary use of this model of the universe, which is going to include things like the elements and the spheres and
Hmm.
beasts and creatures and elves and all these things, like all of these things that are in the model. He's saying, okay, look, and this is in chapter 2 on reservations. This isn't what the natural philosophers were doing. So the save the appearance thing comes in the caution where Lewis is trying to say, look, the real like students of these phenomena were in fact not using the model. They were doing something more complicated. But then there's another epicycle on that, right? So he says, the business of the natural philosopher is to construct theories which will save appearances. Most of us first meet this expression in Paradise Lost, this passage that I had on screen, and most of us
Hmm.
perhaps originally misunderstood it. Milton is translating Tsotsain phenomena, first used, so far as we know, by Simplicius in his commentary on the Aristotelian De Caelo. Simplicius is writing around 500 AD, and he's doing commentaries on Aristotle's On the Heavens. A scientific theory must save or preserve the appearances, the phenomena it deals with, in the sense of getting them all in, doing justice to them. Okay, so you were asking what does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're saying everyone for centuries is doing observations on the stars. Even guys like Chaucer, they're looking through their astrolabes, they're studying the stars. And insofar as they try to describe the movements of the heavens, particularly in this context, talking about the heavens, right? Because Aristotle's talking about De Caelo. Insofar
Hmm.
as they're trying to describe the movements of the planets that they see against the stars, they any and they're also trying to do it predictively because they use it particularly in monastic and ecclesiastical context for predicting when Easter comes
Right.
because of how it fits with the full moon and the equinox and so forth. And you need to know when Easter is in advance because you need to know when Lent starts, right? So they have to be
Hmm.
predictive. They can't just say, "Oh, look, the moon's there. All right, we start now." They have to have known it in advance to be able to do the fasts and such before the feast. Um, that insofar as they're making calculations and predictions and trying to describe these movements, they need to include everything, right? So the saving the appearances is saving the phenomena, saving the phenomenal observations that they have as Lewis said, by taking account of all of them.
So the appearance of the moon at a certain time and the appearance of Venus at a certain time, or is that what they meant?
Right, because there. So I mean, some of the I think with a lot. Well, the planetary stuff. We said this back when we did the Lumen Getty
Hmm.
discussion that the people that need the astrolabes most are doctors, like physicians, because they want to be predictive about when particular treatments go. This is part of the model, right? The discarded image that we're talking about,
Okay.
that there is a physical relationship between the movement of the heavens and our bodies.
Ah, right. Okay. I think most people only remember a fragment of that kind of philosophy in the word lunacy. right? The full moon causes people to go crazy.
Very good.
It's,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. And in their thinking, there's a physical relationship between the stars and your body. Actually,
Hmm.
that's the discarded model. I just said it finally. I get
Okay.
it takes me. I have epicycles. It's like all you have to do when I start in on one of these is you're doing it. You're going on epicycles again, Rachel. Rein in the epicycles here. Okay, so yes, the discarded model fundamentally, we say it's the microcosm and macrocosm, or vice versa. The macrocosm, the stars, right? And the microcosm. The fundamental basis of that image to say the heavenly bodies and their movements have effects on us physically, and
Right.
so the thing that you would need an astrolabe, the astrolabe makers sold most of their astrolabes, their instruments, to doctors, because the doctors use them to predict when um, the zodiac was in particular relationships with everything else, I guess,
Hmm.
and to know when to do things like bloodletting or other kinds of medical procedures,
Yeah.
right? Because they think that there's this absolute relationship between the heavens and the earth, between the stars and their own bodies.
Right.
So in that sense, you need to be that accurate. It's like it's the same kind of level of accuracy as medicine now, right? It's like I need to know all of the symptoms that are coming up, but they look to the stars to understand where those are coming from. Um, Rogue Wave says, I don't know how to use an astrolabe, but I'm currently packing up to take my son camping. He might not
Hmm.
be able to identify every constellation, but at least he'll be able to build a fire. Well, that's good. Okay, well, yes, we're Rogue Wave. If you're thinking about a story on medieval Spain, this is what we're hoping for, right? If like we give you enough of this feeling of what it's like to be in their understanding of reality, then your story will fit their thinking better. And that's what we've been trying to do in writing Drake Alchemicus, so that it has that, but there's a kind of inside outside of it too, that the characters are both in this older vision, but they're also participants in ours, and that is some of the drama that we're dealing with. So our advice here is now stick with us, so that you can get inside of how real they feel this relationship is. And what we want to get to tonight is why we don't, right? Where it broke. Okay, so that makes the saving the appearances. The claim being that as Lewis said, they're trying to, they're not. The claim about saying they're just trying to save the appearances is it's mainly a mathematical problem. That if they can make mathematical descriptions of the movements of the stars and planets, they're not saying that it actually necessarily describes the reality of the way these movements happen, but that it accounts for them all, right? So
Yeah.
in that sense, it's a different kind of model. It's a mathematical model that accounts for all of these movements. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, it's all wrong.
Now that you understand that, let me just pull that rug.
That's my life. So
Or just pull the football.
I believed. I was like, you guys, you think this is hard on you? Think about pity the poor historian. So I thought, in fact, I believed until yesterday that was the right answer, right? Oh, they're saving the appearances. Oh, between Copernicus and Ptolemy, what they're trying to do. Ptolemy has the geocentric model, so that all the movement happens around the Earth, and Copernicus, so as to save the appearances with better math, puts the sun at the center, and but Copernicus, is not actually claiming that it's actually real, and neither were the philosophers for antiquity. Well, then I started, doing a bit of research and found out that's all wrong, or at least for the Greek astronomers who were talking about this problem of saving the appearances, they do seem to have meant hope that they were also describing something real, right? So it may or may not be true, right? In fact, the saving the appearances, if they were only trying to be mathematical, is not actually true.
So what you're saying is they were trying to incorporate the previous philosophers' observations into their new ones. Is that accurate?
So the problem is, as we've said, that the books upon books, the turtles all the way down of the
Yeah.
tradition, all of this goes back to, I mean, the Greeks go back to the Babylonians, right? This
Mhm.
stargazing is a very, very ancient science.
Yes.
And the Greek philosophers, who the medieval Christians, both in the Greek and Latin tradition, and then it goes through Arabic too, right? Because when the Muslims conquer the Hellenistic regions, they take over a lot of this learning as well. So it's all there, right?
Hmm.
But at least among the Greeks, like Aristotle, whom Simplicius was commenting on, it's harder to tell whether or not they mean it physically or not, right? Is it simply a mathematical construct that they're using to predict movements, or do they actually want to describe the physical reality? And um, so it's not, in fact, true that they're just saving the appearances. Milton has led us all astray. But Milton probably didn't. It's like it's hard. Every single, like I say, pity the poor historian. You get used to this if you do what I do, which is you think you know something, you've read it in books, you've read it in many, many books. You go to check it, and like the article I was reading about these saving the appearances, it came out like in the 70s, I think. So it's
Hmm.
not new knowledge in like that field. It's new to me because I don't work on ancient Greek philosophy. So I just had
Hmm.
never looked it up, right? I look it up and suddenly, oh no, it's far more turtles, right? Um, and so even that sense of complexity is more complex, more happy cycles, right? However,
Hmm.
what we get with the important point here is to use it's whatever it is, this idea of saving the appearances is now used to contrast what modern science does against pre-modern, right? So anytime people say, "Oh, well, they're just trying to save the appearances," Milton was trying to say it's not worth it because you can't do it accurately anyway. God laughs at it. Now,
Hmm.
if you get it, it's one of those, "Oh, well, they thought the Earth was flat," which is not true either.
No, no.
But what it is our throwaway prejudice on the part of science that, oh
The
well,
science.
the science only comes into being in the 17th century when Milton was writing. More irony. And modern science, not only do we want to, have mathematical predictability in the basis of our descriptions of reality, but we are dealing with real reality, not just saving the appearances, right? We have the
Yeah.
reality. They just made misleading models.
Well, at that point, you can make up any model you want.
Well, oh, really? Okay. So, but think about this, right? It's like what I said at the beginning. You think, you audience, students, class, um, we tend to, in our modern culture, tend to think science tells us the truth, right? And insofar as maybe it gets things wrong occasionally, but it's always grounded in the truth. Whereas pre-modern science is all, that model building that just posits things like astrology.
So there's something really bothers me about what you just said.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it's not that you said something inaccurate. It's that science will get something wrong sometimes, but then they always try to set it right because they're unencumbered by these superstitions. But that implies that they are morally upright people who would never lie or succumb to temptations of reputation. And we know that's not correct because quite a few people lied about quite a few things in the science over the past 5 years. And I'm just using that as an example.
Okay, you're jumping
But it's
ahead.
I I can't help it. I can't help it.
Hold that thought. She's triggered already. Okay, but what I want
I have a hair trigger these days.
good.
So,
The thought I want you to have with is this and this is why this is fundamental to our exploration of what Lewis is trying to show us in the discarded image, right? Because the whole claim with the discarded image is saying that model, which he calls a model, right? He says this is a model of the universe that we're trying to imagine ourselves into if we want to read Spencer, right? Or if we want to read Chaucer or Dante, right? That they have this model of the universe that includes this relationship between the heavenly and the earthly, with all sorts of ramifications that we're gonna need to get into. Um, but that was replaced, and to a certain extent, Lewis is still in his description of it all. That was replaced in modernity by our completely rational and observation based understanding, right? Will you grant that that's an accurate?
I would grant that's what the people promoting it think. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay. So you've heard of Descartes, right?
Yes.
Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, right?
Hmm.
More famously, here he is thinking before he met with Queen Christina of Denmark, who famously brought him to Stockholm to teach her philosophy. They didn't get along very well. She tried to. The story goes that she made him wake up really early to go teach her philosophy.
Oh yeah.
Caught
Right.
pneumonia and died. The and actually quite young. He was only 53. So she drags him up to Stockholm. He dies in the winter. She goes to Rome and converts to Catholicism. So it has a happy ending after all.
Yes.
Anyway, what we need to do is think about his main contribution to philosophy. Now, the cogito ergo sum, the context is he's in his meditations trying to eliminate everything that's doubtful, right? And he gets to this one moment, which is sort of topical to our problem, but he gets to this moment where he's doubted everything that has ever been taught. He was taught by Jesuits, right? So he's doing this sort of Jesuit exercise. I'm not going to believe any. Excuse me. I'm going to believe anything except for something I can be absolutely certain about. And the thing that he thinks he can be absolutely certain about, I guess not having met an AI, is that because he thinks he exists, right? So that I think, therefore I am is his moment at which he's in his sort of descent into doubt. He's about to flower back out and say, oh, then I can like reason from these first principles, all this other stuff. But my first principle, my point of origin, is going to be, I think, cogito. Therefore, I exist. I am, and he does that before he gets to that he's certain that God exists. That he's more certain about himself existing than God.
Okay. But he hasn't proven to me that he exists by that statement.
Your mileage may vary. Anyway,
Could be a figment of my imagination, you know.
he could. Well, see, this is why we're never going to get out of the Bodleian Library, right?
No.
There's going to be books upon books upon books upon books where we're ever going to get to Chaucer or Dante. But this is actually the real problem, that we don't just come to, and this I think is a huge problem. Rogue Wave saying you want some tips on writing, right? Fantasy and stuff like that, or historical fiction. When you come to these other ways of imagining our reality, philosophical, problem, you don't come to it through one layer where there's not one veil, right? There's
Right.
well, when I can narrate it quickly by century, right? And sort of each century has its main veil, but then there's there's sub veils, there's epicycles of veils within the ways in which people have argued everything out, right? And
Hmm.
a good deal of the problem that I've been working through as a medievalist, I know what they thought in the Middle Ages, and then I'm talking to people who are alive in the 20th, 21st century. And maybe if I'm talking to someone who works on the 17th century, they have one ground of thinking about the problem. If they work on the 18th century, it's another. If they work on the 19th century, it's another. I mean, things like for example, my idea about chivalry. I got in a little trouble,
It's like that. Yeah.
a little bit.
But
10
spot
years,
of bother.
10 spot of bother about saying 3 cheers for white men. I meant
Yeah,
chivalry.
dare you.
I meant chivalry. I've got some I've got a new friend on Gab who likes that I like chivalry. Well, and then I had the world fall down on me, right? Because of how dare you
Mhm.
say all of these things? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm talking about, like this idea that they have, particularly in the 12th and 13th centuries, about knights defending women against,
Right.
and then the peace of truce of God, that the knights are supposed to discipline themselves so they don't have war all the time, and that they are meant to be beholden to certain ideals of virtue and behavior, and that developing a sort of ethic of, they're not always living up to it, obviously. Responsible warfare. And I thought, saying 3 cheers for white men was just pointing to that. Oh, no, no, no. Right. And when I went to write on my blog about the veils through, I was thinking about Tocqueville and his description of the way American women were, liberated, and because they were all defended, and no one would think of taking advantage of a woman. And then there's another layer in the 18th or 18th century. I think I did a one on Walter Scott, right? And there's another layer in the chivalric literature, and there's another layer with the idea of the difference between Vikings and Crusaders, and then there's another, and then you realize none of our ideas, none of our cultural ideas come to us in even simple binary form. Like chivalry was good in the Middle Ages and bad in the 19th century. It's not, it doesn't work like that. You're dealing with these epicycled, that's going to just be our metaphor tonight, the layers upon layers of expectations and assumptions that have spun up themselves against themselves as answers to current problems that then turn into answers that then create new problems.
Right.
Right. So one of them is Descartes' idea of the mind-body split. Right. And this is interesting because at the moment, cognitive scientists do not tend to think that the mind and the body are completely separate. Maybe they do now because of the AI, because they think they can, well, anyway. But back 20 years ago, when I was sitting in on cognitive science classes, it was clear that they had an embodied sense of it, right? The mind is somehow emergent from the operations of the brain.
Right.
They're little, and now of course they've done more studies and realized, well, you have nerve centers around your heart and nerve centers in your solar plexus, and maybe actually your whole body is part of your thinking. Oh dear. Right. But
I had not heard that. That's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like to say, guys do sports, everybody must do sports. I'm a little tired tonight because I was at fencing practice last night. We're a full system, right? And that we didn't think that, or at least pretended not to, or had a model that we were not, in fact, an integrated mind, body, soul system is, thanks to Descartes, or at least his formulation of it, that there is a difference between the phenomenal world and realizing the appearances and saving the appearances is phenomena, right? So we say the phenomenal world, the world of things that, phenomenon, right? The things that appear in the world that we sense with our senses, that we have physical contact with and stuff. He says that extended world, the res extensa, the things extended into the world, the phenomenal world, matter, is completely distinct from the thinking, the res cogitans, right? So you have the things that are thinking, our imagination, our mind, and the phenomenal world and everything outside of it, which then, following Descartes' reasoning on that, ends up with no way to understand how the mind relates to the body, which is kind of still where the cognitive science is, because they don't actually believe in consciousness. They can't ever explain it. They don't know what it is, because it doesn't seem to simply inhabit the body. It's something else, but they don't know how. Anyway, the theorizing on it goes back to Descartes. There's a mind and there's a body, and they're not, how they're connected at all, if at all. It's even worse than saying whether the heavens are connected to the earthly, right? It's like the mind isn't even clearly participating in the body, or vice versa, in the way Descartes talks about it. In fact, when he's dying, he talks about how it's so good that his soul is no longer going to be imprisoned in his body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, not much of a Catholic, was he?
Yeah. Raised by the Jesuits. Yeah. So no,
Yeah.
this is right. So he thinks of the soul as imprisoned in the body. The material world he's very Gnostic in that way. Right?
Yeah, it is. I was just thinking that. Yeah. Or yeah, isn't that what the Cathars taught too? Wasn't it?
So the two effects of this we can see very, very powerfly, still operative. That in the thinking in terms of the res extensa, the extended world, is that the only things that are real from this perspective are things that can be quantified and tested by experiment.
Like the soul? Oops. Yeah.
Well, no, you can't quantify the soul and you can't testify. So
No.
but that's the default now, right? Everything you want to number it, you want to like make charts of quantities, right? We're drowning in statistics about,
Yes.
quantities of stuff, right? Because the only true thing for modernity has become quantity, and experimental testing, right? And and everything else simply doesn't really exist, right? There's no qualitative reality. So colors, um, senses, scent, right?
Hmm.
The invisible, right? Anything that doesn't that's not quantifiable and experimentally testable isn't real in
Oh,
this Cartesian
but
sense.
but
It's on the one hand
but
he thinks of it as a prison for the soul, and on the other hand, scientifically, and we are starting to get this, science just but up to this point just meant knowledge, right? Scientia, but we're veering into it. It's the only science that you can have after Descartes, roughly speaking, etc., epicycles, is of the qualitatively testable
okay,
material.
but they understood disease. They understood something was killing people, but they couldn't see it.
Well, that's why then they'll look for it in the microscope or something like that, right? It's like if you think,
Then, but even the plague days, they would still, isolate infected corpses.
okay, so again, all I'm trying to do right now is establish our own biases in the present,
Right. But
right?
I'm thinking back to that time where, I mean, the bias was, I guess it was in its infancy then because they were trying to disconnect philosophy from observational science by the sounds of it. But
Well, okay, so
they knew
Descartes
better.
does this, and some of what we're trying to unpack tonight. My husband helped me with that phrase "unpack," right? I was like,
Hmm.
everything needs to be unpacked.
Hmm.
Do you know where the phrase comes from?
All I see is moving boxes, but I'm guessing that's not the answer.
Well, I had thought of it as just like, all these layers that I'm always having to deal with. It's like unfolding a map, right? If you have the map all folded
Yeah,
up, I'm going to unpack it and we're going to lay it out. So no, it's from therapy. You've got a lot of baggage. We're going to have to
I
unpack
was close.
it.
What's kind of baggage?
Oh
It's
yeah, you were
emotional
yeah, no, but
baggage.
yeah, well
Yeah.
exactly. So your emotional baggage we're going to have to unpack. That was not at all the way I was using the metaphor. So we get trapped by these linguistic shapes, right?
Right.
There's sort of these the metaphors that design how we actually argue, and they come from one place and go to another, right?
Hmm.
So what we're trying to do right now is understand that it's thanks to Descartes' philosophizing that we end up in modernity with these convictions that modernity still has. I will prove to you that Descartes still rules in ways that everyone has been having to deal with incredibly intimately for the last several years.
I'm trying not to say anything snarky about the Jesuits.
Forget the Jesuits.
So,
So there's a difference between gender and sex.
are you asking a question? Is there a difference?
Are we? Why have we had so
Right.
much trouble explaining
Because of
what?
the English language.
No, 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 no. Stick
Yeah.
with
Okay.
Descartes. Stick with Descartes.
Okay.
What's sex?
Reproductive
Oh,
organs.
so it's physical, right?
Yeah, it's
It's
physical.
physical. It has a physical reality. It's determined by your biology. It's your sex is a physical reality, right? Gender
Hmm.
has been abstracted into something that exists only in your mind. So you could have something in your mind, res cogitans, that is different from your physical self, res extensa, right? These two things are separable. And thanks to Descartes, that's why we've had this argument over whether or not you can change sex, change gender, whichever it is, right? It's that mind body dualism that's this Gnostic level of disconnect between the um mental, spiritual, and the physical.
Hmm.
So the Cartesian thinking is still very, very much with us in the kinds of arguments that we've
Oh,
been having
yes.
politically. of late, right? That you can have
Hmm.
this idea thing, and our guru for tonight, Vogelin, gets to that, right? That you can have this, or maybe I was reading Morello. Oh dear, I've been reading too much. I don't remember which book it was in.
You
Uh,
haven't, you, yeah, yeah.
it must have been in Morello. It's not in Vogelin, is it? That you can have
You
this
mentioned,
idea in your head, and the ideas are more real than the physical.
that'd be Morello, would be
Okay,
Vogelin, because I
Morello.
didn't read them.
It,
Yeah.
he's talking about Descartes too, right? And this problem of the res extensa and the res cogitans ripples out into all of these other effects, right? That
Yeah.
we barely, it's like we think you can take your mind and stick it in a robot. What, thank you
Well,
so much, those so very much Descartes, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There are some tech lords that sincerely hope so. They're very
Right, and
public
this
about
is
that.
why, because it's been so effective. Okay, so that's horrible enough as it is. It gets worse, right?
Can always
surely,
get worse.
surely, 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 say surely, there's nothing wrong with Cartesian coordinates. Cartesian coordinates, they're just like graphs, right? We all learned to do. Descartes, these guys in the 17th century, it's like you read their Wikipedia entries and they did everything right. So he's philosophizing and worrying about whether he exists, and he's also inventing mathematical notations.
Hmm.
And although I think what he did was he didn't do the full x-axis. Well, anyway, we call these Cartesian coordinates coming from Descartes, thinking that you can map points on graphs in
Hmm.
on these dual axes, and that and he's translating algebra into geometry or vice versa, right? That he's making a geometrical representation of algebraic equations.
Okay.
You think about this kind of graphing underlies all of our um, computer imaging as well as our engineering and things like that. It's like this is just a tool, right?
And our predictions.
And our predictions. How so?
How so? Well, they use graphs like this to present stock increases or decreases, prices,
Right,
weather,
right.
right? What are the trends? Are they going up or down?
All of it, yes. These
Yeah.
graphs, right? They're absolutely everywhere. It's like the sort of magic. If the aliens were to drop in, whether they have or not, right? And look at all of our sign language. It's finding these things, they find these kinds of graphs absolutely everywhere, because we just think in
Yes.
terms of dual coordinate or three-dimensional graph. But the coordinate Cartesian coordinates, they're just simply tools, right? No, 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 no. She's
I
smiling.
I have a feeling you're going to say no.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So here's the thing, right? They're representing reality, right? And you'll say, the XY axis, and here we're showing the equation for a circle, right? X squared
Yeah.
plus y squared equals 4, right? So the radius is 2. Um, that the all they're doing is mapping something, right? So
Hmm.
here's the thing. On a graph like this, and you could say you've seen people fiddle this in the way they exert out particular parts of the curve and things like that, but
Hmm.
where's the point of origin? The axes cross, right? The zero
Yeah.
zero, right? How do you know where the zero is? Where the point of origin of the graph actually lands in your um, representation of the phenomenon?
Well, it's an arrow, so it looks like it just goes on forever.
Well, though, yeah, but the point of origin is where they cross, right? So that's the zero zero on those coordinates.
Hmm.
Like,
But if they but
how
if
do you
they
know where
both
to
go
put
on,
it?
right, if they go on in both directions forever, you don't know where to put it.
Well, no, it's where they cross, right? So, but
But you're putting the cross there. So I
there
mean,
you
yeah,
go. It's
yeah,
arbitrary.
right.
And it's like where's the zero zero? Where is the start, the origin of anything, right? So our Cartesian, if you're going to graph something, you're going to map something, you're going to say where's the point of origin? You put it there. It's absolutely utterly arbitrary. Okay, well, so what, right? It's like it's just a description, right? Okay. Part 2, Newton. Right. Okay. So the thing is here, it's like it's a model, right? It's like we were saying, like the epicycles that they're trying to use to figure out where the planets are and how they're moving. That has to do fundamentally with, at least in astronomy, what's at the center, right? So go back to that.
Right.
Here's the circle, saying where's the center in this graphing that you're going to use to describe the movement of the planet or whatever, right? You just said you picked the origin. You picked the origin. Okay. And we're saving the appearances was supposedly about if we have these movements of the planets and we posit that the Earth is at the center of the system, it creates one kind of mathematical problem. But if no, I have this slides were slightly out of order. If we have the Copernican system where we put the sun at the center, the calculations become easier, right? So it's the mathematical problem is easier to do with fewer, epicycles and additions and stuff. You put the center at the 0 rather than the Earth.
I mean the sun, right?
So
Okay.
so sun at the Earth, sun at the center rather than the Earth, and that's the Copernican system, which is what I'm showing here, which is the one we all know is true, right? Except for a few people who think the Earth is flat and it's still the center. But never mind. The way that we all learn to think about every one of these terms, nature, cosmos, universe, they all have embedded layers of what they mean, right? So we call it the solar system because we put the soul at the center. It's
right.
It's not the Terran system, it's the solar system because we put the soul at the center. That we are convinced that this is a real thing. Convinced that, right? This is when you learn this geography. Can't be geography, that's Earth. This astronomy, cosmology. Anyway, when you learn this in school, you're told this is true, right? Sun is at the center, planets going around. Okay, here's Newton, right? We all know Newton, right? Famous alchemist. Oh, wait.
Didn't know that about him, did you?
Mathematician. We all knew that. Warden and master of the Royal Mint, right? This is as far deep as I'm going to go on that. But that Newton was in charge of the money flow. Should tell you everything you need to know about what.
Oh my gosh, an alchemist was in charge of the money flow. Oh boy.
As they say in Pirates of the Caribbean, currency is now the currency of the realms. Right? Yeah. Consider this guy who we're about to show you pulled a massive fast one, was in charge of that, right? Okay, so let's see. You got the piece of the puzzle now. Saving the appearances of the mathematical problem. Cartesian coordinates 0 is arbitrary, right? That we want to believe that we actually know the reality of things and not just saving the appearances. And we get Newton. All right, now. Everybody who's a physicist can, you can nod along because you already know this, but I didn't really appreciate this properly philosophically until we read Vogelin. Okay. The first law of motion, that's all we're going to talk about. The first law of motion. A body remains at rest or in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless it is acted on by a force. Got that? Shall I read it again?
Got it.
A body remains at rest or in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless it is acted on by a force.
Okay, this is how my brain works. I thought, why a straight line? But anyway.
Well, indeed.
Is that also arbitrary?
Okay.
Or is it related to the Cartesian equations?
It seems harmless enough, right? I memorized that in school too, right? You learn the Newtonian laws of motion, right? Body remains at rest or in motion at the constant speed in a straight line unless it is acted on by a force. Okie dokie. What's rest? I'm,
At,
I'm so gr-
remaining at a fixed point.
Ooh. Because of course, by this time Newton's thinking, and I mean they're all thinking by the late 17th century in Cartesian-y things, right? And
Hmm.
you're used to graphing them, and a point. I mean, this is I okay. I'm showing the Copernican system again, right? But if you were going to graph this, right? It's like you're going to okay. So a fixed point. If I drew it, I love drawing graphs in physics. I wasn't very good at math at physics lab, but I loved the math. Um, telling
I
you
did not
how
love the math.
oh I love the math. The math was great. You could like and matrices and vector calculus. Oh, it's like it was so good, right? Anyway, so you have your Cartesian coordinate and a dot there, right? And there's the dot, and
Hmm.
it's at rest, and it's just gonna stay there at rest unless you like draw a little arrow of the force acting on it, and then it'll move, right? So, but it's sitting there at rest in this what? And then I just like draw a dot, just all by itself, right? Draw
Hmm.
draw that. I warmed her up on this the other night.
Yes,
You draw that dot, and it's at rest. What does that mean?
it means it's fixed.
Yeah. Okay.
Doesn't
So
move.
I've got uh, River Run saying it's a hyperbole. Felix Ruber, currency conductor. Yes, he definitely was. Uncle Argyll is speakeasy. Galilean relativity has an answer. Okay, what we're getting to is the saving the appearances that has been pulled on us in modernity. Um, medieval, this is one place I'm going to give you a medieval example, right? And I do, back when we had Hans on a few weeks ago, I said, like, I have not done the reading for this because I know it's just like finding out that in fact the Greek philosophers were probably trying to describe reality and they weren't just saving the appearances. I doubt everything I'm saying, never mind Descartes, right? I doubt it because I haven't done the deep dive on absolutely everything. But from my college class, when we read the discarded image and we talked about all these systems, right? One of the things we talked about was the kind of thought experiments that the scholastics have in the 13th and 14th centuries, particularly when they've been told they can't um, teach Aristotelian physics as if it's true, because Aristotelian physics included things like the eternity of everything, right? No creation. So
Right.
there are ways in which Aristotelian physics contradicts scriptural physics, and so we don't want to like contradict scripture. So okay, so instead of saying that it's actually true, we'll say what ifs, right? And one of the scholastic what ifs that I liked the most was okay. So they're starting with in their imaginations, the Earth is at the center of the system, right? This Earth is at this. It's not the Copernican system which we're looking at now, but the Earth is at the center of the system, and we're on the Earth, so we're at the center. So we're in the middle. Where it's like you think rest would be this earthly situation, right? It's like absolute movement. Everything else is moving around it, and the Earth is at rest, right?
Hmm.
If God moved at all, would you know?
That is
Right?
our late night student at 2 in the morning conversation,
Hey,
if
they're
I
in
ever heard
Paris. They're
one.
drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
If a tree falls in the forest, no one's around it. Does it make a sound? Right. It's one of those questions.
it very definitely is. Okay, so if a body is at rest and it's all by itself, just like in the scholastic imagination, the body's at rest, the earth is at rest, and it moves, and everything else moves with it, right? Because like, but you could do it just with the point, right? If the point's at
Hmm.
rest and it's just in a not place, right? Some space. This also, I realized Morello talks about this, and that's where I got that. That because of Cartesian coordinates, we end up with the concept of space, which eradicates our sense of place, which has other
Mm.
interesting elements. But anyway, you got the body at rest, all by itself, no other bodies around it. What's rest?
Because you can't say it's at rest unless it's contrasted with something else that isn't.
See, you're smarter than Newton. I did not.
No.
It's like, okay, so guys, relativity not new, right? It's actually the big swindle. It's talk about when it's like New, how Isaac Newton wrecked Western civilization with one weird trick, right? This is the weird trick. He posits absolute space. What does that mean? Okay, because what Casey just said, right? Motion is always relative to something else, right? Newton, in order for this first law that we have in the Principia, axiomata sive leges motus, right? The laws of motion, right? Body remains at rest. The only way he can make this work is for there to be something fixed against which it is at rest. And in his imagination, he's using the fixed stars, right? Because it's like in the Copernican system, there's still the fixed stars out there. They're not like an expanding universe and stuff like that. They say, but what he needs is a space that is fixed and absolute, within which these resting and moving bodies can rest and move. But it's a swindle because it's like he's if you drew it honestly, in absolute terms, and say the body by itself, just there with nothing in relation to it at all, no relations. This is relativity is, right? Nothing relative. The movement is not relative to anything. It's just absolutely at rest. Space doesn't exist, right? He had to posit the existence of absolute space, a fullness of absolute somethings, in order for his first law of motion to work.
Did he ever say what he thought space was?
God.
Or you said it was God himself
Yeah.
who was the space. So when New Age people talk about, asking for the universe's blessings, they're actually getting the idea from Newton.
Ironically enough, sort of.
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So no, because he's created this. He's like Descartes with his Ergo Ergo Sum. He's suddenly created this problem for himself that he needs for his laws of motion to work in the way that he's described them, for there to be absolute space. And then he's created a situation in which to understand where God is. This is why we end up in the stupid arguments we do online about God. Thank Newton, right? Wrecked civilization with one easy trick, which is not acknowledging that motion was relative.
Yeah. And yet demanding everybody, well, maybe he didn't demand it, but certainly people came after him demanding everybody accept it without question.
Well, so this is
which makes it a religion.
Okay, here's where Vogelin comes in. This is our guy, Eric Vogelin, right? He fled the Nazis because he refused to support the Nazis, although apparently his father and his sister did, but he was Lutheran, right? So this is he's unfortunately not Catholic, but he is thinking in Christian terms in most of his arguments. And in the essay that we read to sort of prep us, and I found this referenced in Spike Bucklow's book on red. So there you go, right? Thinking about color and alchemy gets us to, oh, right, why we're all deceived about reality. And what Vogelin's essay is published in 1948 called The Origins of Scientism. And this actually matters a lot because it's very much where we're trapped at the moment. What Casey was saying earlier about, people that trust the science, right? So Vogelin's definition of what thinking of scientism is worth having here. So he says, the result of this development, let's see. Okay. So we're in this situation now because we have this new science that has all these consequences that we'll point to. But we end up with scientism from this rise of modern mathematics and physics because they get so fascinated with this new science, quote, to the point of underrating and neglecting the concern for experiences of the spirit. They developed into the assumption that the new science could create a worldview that would substitute for the religious order of the soul, which is, in fact, what Lewis is kind of talking about in this. I mean, Lewis is writing about the same time as Vogelin is, right? In this. And they culminated in the 19th century in the dictatorial prohibition on the part of scientific thinkers against asking questions of a metaphysical nature. The results of this development lie before us today in the form of the scientific creed, which is characterized by three principal dogmas. One, the assumption that the mathematized science of natural phenomenon is a model science to which all other sciences ought to conform. So that's taking the res extensa quantitative science and saying, if you can measure stuff as we do with the natural phenomenon, that should be what we do with everything. So we end up with the social sciences, and the reason that this STEM still exists and the humanities are always getting trashed because of this kind of claim, right? That all study, all knowledge fits to this model of mathematical understanding, which is unfair to mathematics, quite frankly. But anyway, two, that all realms of being are accessible to the methods of the sciences of phenomena. Thus, we try to weigh the soul, for example, right? It's like you get this sense that there is no, just like with Descartes, there is no reality that we can study that isn't material and extended. And the effect of the Cartesianness being that if you can't study it in those terms, it doesn't exist. That's not what Descartes said, but it's where we ended up. And three, that all reality which is not accessible to sciences of phenomena is either irrelevant or, in the more radical form of the dogma, illusionary, right? So we have Vogel's writing in 1948 this problem. We have there's no reality of the soul. There's the only knowledge that we have is knowledge that we have based on the model of knowledge that we get from the mathematization of the physical world. And if we can't mathematically study it, it doesn't exist. It's totally illusory.
He suggests a very sinister movement going on, and when he's writing in 1948, especially when he talks about bringing the social sciences in line to try to push this, and that really is where psychology started being used a lot on the general populations of the Western world, at least, because they had access to mass media that the third world didn't. It worked.
It worked. Yeah. No, he's 1948. He's right in the thick of all of the stuff that we're now feeling the long-term effects of
Yes.
Of this.
And we were born in the 1960s. We've seen it our whole lives.
Right.
And people are rapidly catching on. It isn't just nostalgia. People recognize something very wrong going on around them. It's something unnatural, as a matter of fact.
Well, and it's following on this Cartesian dualism to start with, and this is where I'm reading this. I was reading this essay because he has this wonderful phrase about the orgy that we're in right now. But then
Yes.
I'm getting to it. And I'm reading it saying, oh, it's all Newton's fault. Okay, so how is it all Newton's fault? And this is that what we've been talking about with the problem of absolute space. Vogelin points to, right, that Newton found it necessary to assume the existence of absolute space and of absolute motion in order to define rest, right? This, I was talking about it in terms of the Cartesian coordinates and how it's only, the dot is only moving if it's relative to other dots, right? Or against the zero that you've arbitrarily put there, so you can graph. I did so many of these graphs in algebra or something. You do the parabolic
right.
graphs and stuff like that, and it's like, oh yes, these are movement lines, and well, only relative to that zero, right?
Yes.
The movement has to have a relationship. What I realized about this is it means that our fundamental understanding of the physical world is off, because it's not just Einstein's relativity and time and blowing things up and stuff. It's the old model was actually relational. It's the heavens are in relation to the earth. The stars are in relation to your body. Something moves here, this other thing moves over here. Because Newton created this fiction of absolute rest, we ended up without any sense of relation. So that everything that we study is chopped up into pieces, And science medicine right now is, happily, finally, after millions of people died. Yes, Newton lied, people died. I meant it when I said that as a
Yeah,
teaser, right? Because Newton lied about absolute space, we have been studying medicine as if people's bodies don't even connect to themselves.
exactly. Everything's been broken up into their individual parts as if they are acting independent of one another. And this is the true in every single field. I think they call it specialization, though, right?
Yep.
So you have pure math and you have applied practical math. Why are they two different things? They shouldn't be.
Well, and I mean, medicine is all, you're going to study the nervous system as opposed to the cardiovascular system, or you're going to study, neurobiology as opposed to hormones, or you're going to study,
Right.
you know, joints as opposed to your eyes, nose, and throat. Maybe they're all connected, but thanks to the way in which, and this is what then Vulcan says. Okay, so start with Newton posits this absolute space, which is it's a fiction, doesn't exist. Um, Therefore, it's a model. It's just as much saving the appearances as the claim was that the Greek philosophers were doing, right? And Newton needs absolute space to save the appearances on his own modeling
Mm-hmm.
currency, right? Um, the interesting thing that Vogelin points out is, and people caught him at the time, right? This was not
Yes.
news. Leibniz caught it.
Yep.
And the very, very fascinating thing, it's Vogelin's article is a little hard to read, and I hope, I don't think I'm reading stuff into it that's not there. It's just I'm
No,
unpacking it.
it's so much.
I'm
Yeah,
unpacking it.
it's so much name dropping in it. But yeah, it's yeah. I remember Leibniz called him out on it, and oh, sorry, no answer.
Well,
Yeah.
right, and there's this very interesting exchange between Leibniz and Samuel Clarke, shown here. Leibniz is the guy with the bigger wig, um, and that Leibniz, he understood the problem, right? He understood that, in fact, motion has to be relative to something else. The bodies in motion have to be relative to each
Right.
other, which, and this is a sort of, this is why Clarke thought it was silly. He's saying, well, that means that if a body moves, that must be because the other one's moved. And Leibniz is like, yeah. So guess what? Einstein didn't discover it. It was already known long ago. But Clarke, what happened with Clarke is basically saying, well, I don't understand it, so it's not real. You don't, and it's this Leibniz Clarke correspondence that Vogelin points to having this ramifying effect that let me see where it's 492. This was great. This is at the end, 492, when he's talking about the effects of a lot of this, and this is his third effect, which I thought was hilarious. Because he's talking about the transfer of the pathos, right? The attention on the problem from the problem to the scientist, right? Um,
Hmm.
that a further trait connected with the transfer of pathos is the rise of aggressive dilettantism in philosophical matters. Aggressive. So
Aggressive.
great, right? You guys, we're just going to
Yeah,
call
the
you out for
way with
aggressive
words.
dilettantism in your philosophy, which is rampant on the internet right now, right? It's like everybody's going to be mad at each other. Again, this is not a question of simple ignorance or dilettantism as such, which may occur at any time. The new and dangerous element is the readiness of the dilettante to impose his ignorance as a standard on others. You've
I
seen
am
it.
the science.
Well, but this, I mean, that's whether Fauci's a dilettante or not. But the claim that we've seen it constantly in the internet, uh, mudslinging, right? Well, I don't understand it, so you're dumb, right? It, it,
Yeah, that happens everywhere.
it happens constantly. It's like I will say something, and
Yeah.
if I say something and people, well, not me, but you'll say something, people don't understand what you're talking about, and their response can be, and this is Vogelin writing this in 1948 and saying this has been going on for hundreds of years, thanks to Newton, that if I say it and you don't understand it, you can dismiss me, right? So,
Yeah.
right? Uh, Clark's "I do not understand" in answer to Leibniz's exposition of the problems of time and space is the ominous symptom of the new attitude. He really does not understand, and that settles the argument in his favor, in Clark's, right? So,
Yeah.
because Clark can sit around saying, well, Leibniz, I don't get what you mean about how the bodies have to move together. And, if one moves,
Well,
and
it's more
therefore, and therefore it's not true, right?
yeah, exactly. That's the I am the science attitude. It's like, how dare you question me if it's in reverse. If I'm not getting this, well, then it's just not important, right?
That, right?
Yeah.
That's it. And what, I mean, I had not considered this as an effect of Newton until reading Vogelin this week, saying that kind of, I mean, it's rampant for my field, right? It's like the scientists say it to us all the time, the historians. Well, you're completely wrong because I don't understand why you just explained what you did about how, historical causation works. Oh, well, that can't be true. I don't understand it, so you're wrong. And
Everyone has experienced this on some level if they've ever
yes,
heard this expression thrown back at them. Well, if you say so, right? And then that's the
right.
end of the argument.
Well, but they mean to say it's like you've made it more complicated than I can grasp, and therefore you're wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not the most scary thing that's changed. Okay. So this is, it gets worse, right? And this is where I think Vogelin was actually quite astonishing. Okay, this is the section that's on 44. Okay, now how does Clark manage to get away with this, right? This is a very interesting thought to say, thanks to Newtonian mechanics and the way in the 18th century objections like Leibniz's to Newton's descriptions were belittled and rejected, right? How is it that, I mean, why did it work, right? And that's what you were saying. You were just saying right now about, well, but Newton, because among other things, he had the currency, right?
Literally.
Literally, ended up with so much prestige, right? You can see his tomb in Westminster, right? It's this incredible epitaph of how, he's transformed everything, and that Newton's reputation, fed very likely by his control of the bank, among other things, right? His
Hmm.
chairmanship of the Royal Society, or whatever it was, the headship of the Royal Society. He was just in control of so much of what counted as science in the latter part of his life, that to question him turned into this, well, you think you're smarter than Newton? Well, Leibniz was, but the you're smarter than Newton thing means that we end up with the world that we live in now, right? Which is where science has all this prestige, and the advance of science, the science of which Newton is the great representative genius, has profoundly affected the political and economic structure of the Western world. Let us list the principal features of this change. When it goes on for like a whole page of all of the
Yes.
things that we now experience from technology and industry, and
Right.
the transformation of our social situation, so that we have industrial social classes, the rise of the industrial proletariat, the
Yeah.
white collars, the intellectual proletariat, the managerial class, and on and on and on and on. All
He was a prophet.
arises, yes, all arises out of this Newtonian prestige, which, in the Encyclopedia, turns into the Enlightenment, right? So it starts in the 17th century, these philosophical claims, completely arbitrary, zero, zero, cogito ergo sum. You realize Descartes' cogito ergo sum puts himself at the zero, zero origin,
Yes.
right? I am the center of all that I can describe. And that is our fundamental position in science ever since. I mean, it's interesting, the social sleight of hand that Descartes and Newton were able to pull off. I mean, Descartes ends up being invited by Queen Christina to teach her, right? So, whatever kind of social self promotion these guys were doing, it worked.
It worked.
It really, really worked. Okay, so we end up with all of these things, up to the standard of living. He's including things like you know the political decline of nations who do not possess the raw materials or the population figure or the territorial expansion necessary for the effective utilization of industrial technology. We're still in that, right?
We're still in that. They had been in that for a while. It's just that it accelerated so much in the 20th century
Right.
that I think that the gaps got larger between countries that had and countries that had nothing.
Yes, and but it's still what we're fighting over. The access to we talk about this in
Yes,
my Telegram channel all the time, right? The way to watch the waterways, watch the pirates, the currency is the currency of the realm, right? You're trying to find access to these resources as to use them
right.
industrially and to control the populations that you
So
need for those.
they had technology to make more more financially viable use of cotton, like with the cotton gin,
Right,
right?
right.
For inventions like that. And now the resources that they're going after are to create more technology. It's kind of come full circle. So as before they invented this technology to use the resources, now they're looking for the resources to create more technology. The
Constantly,
resources,
it's eating
yeah,
itself. Yeah.
lithium, rare earth minerals, well, oil and gas. They've been using that for a while, but yes, the building of computers and supercomputers is kind of new. Well, just really new, like in the last 20 years, I think.
It still works on the Cartesian assumptions.
How
Right.
so?
I mean, this is why we're even having an argument about whether AI is like consciousness, right?
Oh,
Right.
right,
They're positing because they don't understand what the mind or the soul is. They composite the existence of intelligence arising out of their material because they don't really understand the relationship between the mind and the body. So,
right.
well, okay. So, Rogue Wave was saying modern astronomy assumes a 0 point outside of Earth. Well, that makes sense, but it's still an assumption, right? It's like you've got to stick it somewhere, right?
And it's still arbitrary. Wherever you put it, it's going to be arbitrary until we can
Right,
find the beginning and the end of the universe.
right. And he's saying absolute space like dark energy. Yeah. Yes. Like, oh, we can't figure out why it doesn't work with our calculations. So we'll just say, oh, it's dark energy, right? Yeah. Right. So this is, I think,
Who else gets away with this? You have to admire that just the balls on these people, to make these
saving the appearances, aren't
assumptions.
they? Right? Oh,
Yeah,
those medieval astronomers, they were so silly. They didn't know what they were doing. They're just saving the appearances. Oh, really? Right? Tell me about your epicycle dark energy.
yeah.
Rogue Wave saying, like a ship out to sea without a fixed point of reference, modern science has no grounding fixed point. Amen. Everything becomes relative and everything becomes flotsam and jetsam. It is, right? It's like, but what's funny is they will, if you call them on that, like Leibniz tried to clark on it. Oh, well, you just don't understand the science. And you're like, I think I do. And you're inventing
Yeah,
the epicycles are out there.
what's been done is it's cartoonish. I mean, it's worthy of Monty Python in their heyday. When they're making fun of the witch burning. All you have to do is like point and yell heretic at somebody or a witch at somebody,
Right.
or you know, or enemy of the people, and that's all it takes. It's opposition control using the crowds, using embarrassment and money, lots
Mm,
of money.
money, currency. So, but I
Yeah,
mean, what's interesting, like we have this scientific method. This is the real thing versus the science worshippers method, but they're not really distinct for most people, right? It's like, oh, there's a true
hmm
scientific method. That's what we actually follow, not this crazy thing that these um nonsensical people who trust the science
true
have. It's like
science
you
hasn't
trust
been trusted. hasn't
true science hasn't been tried,
been tried
right?
yet. Just like true Marxism. Yeah,
Right. So this is where Vulcan just really comes to it on. So he's saying the effect of all of this is this interrelation between science and power, which we've been talking about, has become
yeah,
so decisive in international politics that in the wake of modern wars, remember he's writing in 1948, the conqueror resorts to such measures as prohibition of research, destruction of laboratory equipment, the wholesale abduction of scientists into a more or less gilded slavery, and the deindustrialization of the conquered nation. The strict rationality of the procedure, without regard for human or civilizational values, closely resembles the procedure of the most rational of conquerors, Genghis Khan. When the Mongols conquered a country, they took the skilled craftsmen and the shapely women for their personal use and let the rest of the people perish. The advancement of science and the rationality of politics are interwoven in a social process that, in the perspective of a more distant future, I'm glad he thinks there is one, 0 point, right, will probably appear as the greatest power orgy in the history of mankind.
And it did.
So much for that science. Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's all this power orgy, and it's got this rational core of, the utilitarian power that comes out of this scientific. And Vogelin, he's trying, again, this is not an easy essay to read, but what he's trying to say is we've got this study of the quantifiable and the phenomena, right, which has completely eradicated the discussion of substance, and also of actual human substance, meaning things that what it means to be human, which includes things that, thanks to the social sciences, we constantly try to scoop into the natural scientific model. Although there's problems with the natural scientific model too, I think, for natural science. But anyway, try to make the social fit the natural, so you have social sciences and all the other sciences, gender science and, I don't know, art science, and everything turns into science, right? If you've been in the academy long enough, you realize the only way you can get any money is if you put science on it. So I do historical science, don't you know?
That's kind of like when they stuck the word engineer on the end of every job,
right?
Because then they could demand more money, right?
And because it's all about power, right? It's all about this utilitarian control of everything, so that, he says, he says the idea of power through science has a rational core. He's saying that we rationally expand. This expansion is carried on by the mass creed that the utilitarian dominion over nature through science should and will become the exclusive preoccupation of man, as well as the exclusive determinant for the structure of society. In the 19th century, this idea of utilitarian exclusiveness crystallized in the belief that the dominion over man would ultimately be replaced by the dominion of man over nature, and that the government of men would be replaced by the administration of things, right? So he is totally, it's funny, the 1940s, they all saw this managerial tyranny coming. So that you end up with everything being studied in the way that you say you can make everything completely utilitarian, right? Which is, he says, is a nonsensical idea, but that doesn't prevent it from becoming the inspiration of the strongest political movement of our age. Here we can see in the raw the fascination of power that exudes from the new science. It is so overwhelming that it blunts one's awareness of the elementary problems of human existence, the social and psychological. And he doesn't use the word psychology, the spiritual. Science becomes an idol that will magically cure the evils of existence and transform the nature of man. We've gained dominion over nature through science. In order to avoid the misuse of this power, runs the argument, we must now gain control over our social environment through a corresponding advancement of social science. Scientists of more social prestige than human wisdom stand up before large audiences and tell them in all seriousness that social scientists will have to emulate the natural scientists and do their share in order to realize the perfect society. There seems to be no suspicion that the effects of natural science, both beneficial and destructive, are not due to the genius of science, but to the objective structure of the realm of phenomena, which permits the introduction of human action into the cause of chain and effect. Once the law of the chain has been discovered, they don't see what they're saying, right? It's like they think they can work with human society, human nature, in the same way that they work with rocks, right? And they're not realizing that they're dealing with this. But notice what he said there about it's an idol that will magically cure everything.
Yes.
Magically. The graph I'm showing now is this, like, where's your IQ? Well, if you're a mathematician, it's way up there and high, and you're probably a guy, which is fine. But we also end up with this. It's so here's the I forgot what the cartoon is. these graphs, XKCD, these graphs showing it's like the scatter plot in the same in all of these graphs is exactly the same, but they've drawn different curves in it to make different arguments. So he's so obsessed with this ability to graph everything and put it on these Cartesian coordinates. And he's like, you get some data and you're going to throw it on a graph and you say, oh look, and I feel like this every time I see one of these lines through the data. It's like, look, it's rising, look, it's wiggly, look, it's no, it's this, it's right. You are here's drawing your magic spells, right? Here's some dots. Let's draw some magic spells onto them. But what we're really doing is this, which is alchemy. Which I said Newton was one, right? So we fulfilled the Newtonian promise. The expansion of the will to power from the realm of phenomena. So that is the things that appearances, right? The material out there that we can have sensations of, to that of substance, which you realize it's interesting he's Lutheran, because this would have a problem for theology too, right? What are we talking about? God or the transubstantiation or spiritual realities or anything like that? Substance. When I've tried to teach substance in my class on the trivium, it's an interesting problem to try to talk about, because it's like it's the substitio, the thing that undergirds everything else, right? So human nature as substance is, you end up talking in circles a lot because it is the thing that you're trying to describe. The expansion of the will to power from the realm of phenomena to that of substance, or the attempt to operate in the realm of substance pragmatically, as if it were the realm of phenomena, right? So to do social science, or to operate on human interactions in the way that you would with rocks, that is the definition of magic.
Right, because you're trying to you're trying. I don't know if you're trying to attribute to human beings the characteristics of rocks or stones or anything else, or just a machine, or you're trying to, by science, by saying these things, trying to take away their humanity. But no, they wouldn't talk in those terms, though.
They wouldn't. They don't talk in those terms. They don't talk.
No, they wouldn't.
That's what his point is. They can't talk. Yeah. They don't know how to talk about spiritual realities.
So they would have to come up with euphemisms, or just create a new language.
Well, what they've done is, I mean, this is why we end up with the trust the science stuff in the last few years, right? And the it's like the strange sort of how dare you, right? That it's so interesting that it goes back to Clarke and this, like, how you lied to Leibniz. I mean, come on. Newton's great rival in the invention of the calculus. However, he's not stupid, but we've created this, like, if you question the science that I don't understand your objections to, you're the dumb one.
Yeah.
But that what Vogelin is pointing out, the science is in fact, and this is what we've been talking about for years and years and years now, writing Draco Alchemicus, because it comes out of that, Baconian New Atlantis desire for the engineering and the tech to control everything.
Yeah.
Straight up, I mean, the real image of, well, I'd say we're not so much been enchanted. We're worrying about the disenchantment of the world. The world has not been disenchanted. What it's been is cursed. So
right, by our own hands.
by this desire, this will to power and control, which he says, we have ventured the suggestion that in retrospect, the age of science will appear as the greatest power orgy in the history of mankind. This we've got power orgy, great power orgy. We now venture the suggestion that at the bottom of this orgy, the historian will find a gigantic outburst of magic imagination, after the breakdown of the intellectual and spiritual form of medieval high civilization. The climax of this outburst is the magic dream of creating the Superman, the man-made being that will succeed the sorry creature of God's making. This is the great dream that first appeared imaginatively in the works of Condorcet, Comte, Marx, and Nietzsche, and later pragmatically in the communist and national socialist movements.
And in the 1920s film Metropolis.
Yeah. still haven't watched the whole thing. I've just watched that dance scene when she's the whore of Babylon, right?
Yeah, that was crazy.
But he's right, right? The
Hmm.
claim that the discarded image is all the the woo woo and the enchantment and the anti
Well,
science. It's like no,
yeah,
actually, what we're living with now is this it's like J.K. Rowling knew what she was talking about when she made all her you were talking about Hogwarts at the beginning of the stream,
yeah,
right? When she made the only thing the students study at Hogwarts other than history from a ghost is science.
right, right. They study chemistry, their spells, and they study botany,
Yep.
right? And yeah, they actually have a very fine education.
It's completely science, right? It's
Yeah,
magical creatures, so they get some
right.
zoology
Yep.
battle, right? So they have it's all power and
Yes.
science. And the
Yeah.
only and
Science and
it's interesting with they do have some role for history, sort of, but to find
it's an elective. The
and
Hogwarts of history is an
only
elective.
Hermione stays awake for it.
Yeah, she's the only one in the class, I think. She studied ahead. Such a
Right.
fun series.
So, that
But
we end up with here we're back in this magical library, right? Which is the magical library? The one with the manuscripts or the one the Casa Tensei, which when I visited this summer had an exhibit of books of alchemy.
yes,
Here's some furnaces, right? Just to make you think alchemically, right? But the
yes.
alchemy, we're still doing it. Currency
We're
is the currency of the realm. Guess what, guys? You're in it.
well, yeah, we've been doing it since the garden, though, right? Yeah, ye shall be like gods, right?
Well, true, but we've been doing it with this particular level of power fantasy since the 17th century, in
Yes,
which the story is, and that's why, Milton and the discarded image, that Milton is making fun of the philosophers were trying to, study, save the appearances and make epicycles and stuff, because isn't that, I mean, there is a Puritan anti
yeah,
scientific version of that. But we're so used to, but all we see in that is Milton's looking back on the previous centuries of science. Our science is real science, right? And
yes,
it's not that fantasy stuff of saving the appearances, except for absolute space, which doesn't exist, but never mind, right? Or the absolute origin of the cogito ergo sum. But never mind, right? We're in this completely enchanted power orgy of a model that we can't even see how bespelled we are until what does it mean when someone says trust the science? Girl asks mom. It means shut up and obey us.
exactly. This is dogma. Don't question it.
Right. But it's
And if you
exact.
try, and if you try, we'll burn you, or at least all of your bank accounts, and your job, and your reputation.
But look how I mean, this curse. It's a setup from the way in which Newton's prestige, which is what Vogelin's pointing to, right? Newton had such prestige culturally that everybody
Hmm.
just completely ignored the effect of his mistakes on the social one. His argument being that the philosophers philosophy and it used to be natural philosophy, right? That's why I can't talk. The philosophical questions had been intertwined in the ancient understanding, ancient medieval, right? They do philosophy, they do
Yes,
natural science, they try to understand both together. Descartes and Newton rip them apart. And then because Clarke is able to, and Berkeley also has some questions about the Newtonian descriptions. The philosophers go this one way, and philosophy departments are like dying and tiny now in the United States, because who does philosophy? Why would you want to think about what the meaning of life is? I don't know. Theology
yeah.
has the same problem, right? Because of this we've so split them off, and it means shut up and obey us. We
Hmm.
know how things actually work with our magic wizard spells, and you people who are asking us metaphysical questions, I
And
don't
if we don't, well,
understand your
nobody's perfect.
objections.
Shut up and obey.
Shut up and obey.
Yeah.
Right. So what Vogelin laments the fact that these scientists, usually that he's so scathing. He taught at Louisiana in Louisiana, but he ended
Oh,
up
did
in
he?
he actually had some other positions after this. He was at Louisiana when he wrote this essay. Um He's talking about how the people who become scientists all have this sort of inability to recognize the philosophical failures that they're wrapped up in.
Do they even study philosophy? I mean, mid 20th century on, when Vogelin's writing this, I I'm going to say no, that they didn't. I'm going to say
No, this is when
that,
C.P. Snow is talking about the two cultures and how they're not talking to each other anymore.
well, I think the wars might have had something to do with that too, because they put such an emphasis on chemistry and mathematics that everything else went to the side. And it's still very much like that.
Oh, we're still in this
This,
model. Yeah,
yeah,
we're still in absolutely from the post World War II model of
right,
real, the high intellects go into mathematics and physics and blow things up. And
right. You're really, really smart,
the stupid people study human substances like art.
right? People who don't want to do anything. It's like, okay, you have to dream things before you can actually try to build them.
Well, right, but
And then,
that
and then you have to think, why am I having this dream? You actually have to have some self-reflection before you do anything important. And otherwise, you're just a cog in the big STEM machine.
well, so I don't have this graph on screen now, but I'm looking at it. So in the high IQ female to male ratio, right? All the guys are doing physics and astronomy. Absolutely, the smartest guys are doing physics and astronomy. So there you go. Mathematical sciences, a few more women in that one, but it's still mainly guys. Oh, there is philosophy. It's mainly guys, but materials engineering, economics, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical, a lot of engineering, lot of wizards there. Chemistry. You get sort of in the middle. You get history, political science, down to humanities, arts, English language, arts, library and archival science as well. You're gonna never find the books. Psychology. It's like this graph is showing one the feminization of things that we end up being
Yeah,
responsible for all the substances. Mommy, what does it mean when someone says trust the science? Um,
yeah.
but it's clear it's I think I don't think it's so much that you know you can be stupid and do communications. I think it's the prestige has drawn the intellects into those physics and mathematics
Yes.
and separated them out in the way that Vogelin is saying. He said, moreover, with regard to the cultivation of substance, men are gifted differently. The active carriers of the scientific pathos will be the men who are deficient in such gifts. And the penetration of society with the scientific pathos creates an environment that favors the social success of the deficient human types.
Oh
He's
my
coined yet
gosh.
more great terms, and the one he ends up here with is the restratification through the social prestige and success of the deficient types must be expressed in terms of human substance. We suggest the term spiritual eunuchism. Doesn't really trip off the
They,
tongue. They're
I,
spiritual eunuchs. All these guys in their science.
well, okay, here's the thing that just popped into my head. For the past 25 years, women have been pushed into STEM ahead of men. Pushed
Mm-hmm.
into it.
Mm-hmm.
And men have been actively discouraged by that. And I'm wondering if it has anything to do with that. The prophet we're reading tonight, Vogelin, what he just said, what you just read.
Well, I mean, certainly, I mean, men actually do care about spiritual substance too. The social I'm not I
But what I think what he was saying was what's going to be promoted,
right. Yes. That's the
right?
problem. He's saying you're promoting this world in which the spiritual substances are devalued socially. Therefore, but his contrary is the people that end up in the scientific with the scientific uh, mode of
Hmm.
operating tend not to be as interested in the spiritual.
Which
It's
is
a bit of a
is it
funny dig, but
because women are more spiritual than men,
no,
right?
I don't think that's true. I think
Um,
no, I don't.
well, I'm
We
not.
can do
I
it. We
think
can
it
do a
is.
stream on this.
We should do a stream on that because
We
that'd be
should
interesting.
actually, yeah.
Are women more spiritual than men, or do women just talk more about it? And
Put
how would you know if the men are talking, if whether or not they're spiritual?
We should do a stream on that for sure because I disagree, but but the thing is, it's been a huge question in my field in medieval Christianity, right? Because we're looking at a period in which we have some very expressive women writers.
Yes,
Hildegard is her own thing because she's like a little different from the other women, but um,
she's very different.
right, she's very different. But we have,
Yeah.
women's spirituality versus men's spirituality. Men are deeply, deeply spiritual, but it in the current situation, thank you Descartes and Newton, that aspect of their humanity has not been developed or encouraged.
No, it's been actively discouraged
Right.
in the same way they've been actively discouraged from going into STEM. You know? Yeah, it's yeah.
Well, that okay. So I didn't the gender thing, or you're actually men and women, right? The what you are in your head idea thing, but the sort of we end up at the level of the women screaming at the cat. I trust the science. You trust the television.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
that one. That's a good meme. Yeah.
But the problem is everybody, to a large extent, still trusts the science because both sides are still in the, well, there should be good science, right? And
There's still
that's,
it's a
and
yeah.
Vogelin is criticizing the good science as well. He's not criticizing just the peer reviewed fake failed science. He's saying the science as itself is the problem.
Right. So yeah, trusting the science for people today in the modern age, and we'll use medical science as the most obvious example. It's still all about control.
Right. Right.
People don't want to trust God because he's not talking back, not at least not audibly. I can't hear him. You know,
Exactly.
I can hear my doctor though, and if my doctor says, trust me, I've been to lots of schooling, and in this country in particular, we still value people who have an education. Um,
Well, we value
to
people who
a
have
to
the
a
science,
yeah, to
and that's
science education, right? To an absolute manic level in some cases, right? It's like
right.
you don't question these, you don't question your doctor. Well, are you a doctor, right? You hear that a lot, and or and depending upon what crowd you're around with, are you a scientist? What's your degree in? I've heard that before. Um, so yeah, they do value a scientific degree. Why was the most popular Marvel superhero Iron Man
Right.
15 years ago? He was the
Right.
scientist, right? He was the cool guy with lots of money and lots of smarts and lots of gadgets.
Exactly.
And yeah,
Vogelin's not, he's not talking about science in the cat, the way the cat's doing it, right? Saying, oh,
yeah,
you're just trusting the propaganda version. Vogelin's saying the problem is with the science, as
it's with
it's with
yeah,
the whole you know power orgy that
right. It's with the
people are,
scientists.
right.
It's actually the problem is with the scientists because, like Newton and Clark, they're perpetuating this mystique
Mm,
that they're the best, they're the brightest, they're the leaders. We need to follow them. They're going to lead us to the promised land.
precisely, precisely. So we're there, and what we end up with, this is Pugin's famous contrast, right? Instead of the oh, this I put this in because it's the way Vogelin ends on. um so he says, in the end, the science has been revived through Einstein, um but it has, for the moment at least, no visible social or political importance, which he's right. It's like we haven't really absorbed the interconnectedness of things in the way
Mm-hmm.
that we could. The damage of scientism is done. As a philosophical friend aptly phrased it, the insane have succeeded in locking the sane in the asylum. From this asylum, no physical escape is possible. As a consequence of the interlocking of science and social power, the political tentacles of scientific civilization reach into every nook and corner of an industrialized society, and with increasing effectiveness, they stretch over the whole globe. There exist only differences, though very important ones, in the various regions of the global asylum with regard to the possibility of personal escape into the freedom of the spirit. What is left is hope, but hope should not obscure the realistic insight that we who are living today shall never experience freedom of spirit in society.
Hmm.
Boom. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That, they won the war, right? It's 1948. And
Yes.
he's saying we're here. I'm showing Pugin's contrast of the city in 1440 versus 1840, and there's this
Mhm.
giant panopticon prison in the middle of the town in 1840, and Vogelin's saying we're trapped in this asylum and there's no way out.
Mm.
That's too depressing a place to end. So we're going to
That
say
is
there is
depressing.
a way out, and today is the feast of Our Lady Queen of Heaven.
Yay.
we Vogelin should have been Catholic, right? And I've been doing some reading on Tolkien the past few days. A wonderful book, Ben Reinhardt's The High Hallow. If you haven't heard about this book, you need to have a look at it. Tolkien's liturgical imagination, saying
Mhm.
if we take hope out of the fantasy literature that we love, I find so much more hope in Tolkien than in Lewis, because Lewis is still Anglican, and Anglicans kind of Newtonian. This is what's interesting is like Newton does believe in God, sort of, right? He has the effect on him is to have this extended space of God, right? But
Mm.
the image that we've lost, the discarded image, is the integrated image out of which our civilization actually grew. And if we're going to get out of the asylum, maybe Pugin is right with his Gothic architecture, but I think Tolkien is even more right, that we come to it through the songs of the liturgy. So that's a hint of where we think we're going. How's everybody in the chat? Okay, guys, did it all make sense now? Riverend says bullseye. Uncle, I think that maybe they're talking about streams on the difference between men and women's spirituality. I do a
Oh,
stream on that. Okay, so we have votes. Our followers say absolutely do a stream on men and women's spirituality.
yeah,
we
that'll
will
be good.
battle this one out. But for the moment, um, that feels like we're now maybe in a place to start going into the actual discarded image. Because it was like, how do we get past all of the layers of why we can't see it anymore? And the scientism and the Newtonian Cartesian sleight of hand, which is in fact an alchemical magical spell. You've all been
Hmm.
bespelled. It's not just recently with the bad
Oh,
science,
yes.
it's the science.
But maybe if we're just reminded that all we have to do is look, nobody's looking. They don't think there's anything to look at because they've been told there wasn't, but they were wrong.
This is one of the excellent points about, like, how did Tolkien think of all of the magical things that he put in his stories? Took really long walks and looked at the plants. Actually integrated the spiritual and the physical, reintegrated them. Not Cartesian dualism, not Newtonian absolute space, but an actual harmony of the visible and invisible, which is what we say God created in our creed. So maybe is it so simple? We just need to be Christian.
No, we need to be Catholic.
Oh, right. Okay, we need to be Catholic. Anyway, the one of the things is that this mystery of the integration of the earthly and heavenly is in fact what's celebrated in the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting that in fact 2 years after Vogelin wrote this essay, Munificentissimus Deus declares, you know, the recognition of Mary's bodily assumption into heaven as dogma. That rather suggests that it was a kind of timely announcement that we
Wasn't
need
it?
we need to understand what it means for a physical body to have ascended above the angels and to be with God in heaven, and he's ascended into heaven too. So our Lord and our Lady physically in the spiritual reality is where we're trying to get to.
And isn't that wonderful that that happened, that dogma was declared when it was smack in the middle of the 20th century to remind people, look over there. Remember to look, go look, right?
What's so funny is I know all of the long-term history of the arguments over the assumption, and just right now is when I finally appreciate why it's declared when it is. That's great.
Huh, nice,
Things happen in their appropriate time.
right. So it's done
Okay.
then because it was needed then.
It was needed then. It's
Yeah,
definitely, it's needed. It's a meditation that we need to have in order to achieve, and not just, it's like, not just achieve the re-enchantment of the world, but to dispel the disenchantment, say disenchantment in the sense of bad enchantment that we've been caught under with the scientism of the alchemists, the bad alchemists.
yes.
Excellent. Okay. Okay. Well, I feel like as Jack Sparrow would say, we've reached a wonderful place grammatically and what spiritually, and he said whatever he says, right? It's like these things
Ecumenically.
ecumenically. Yes, we've made it to the place
I
where
gotta watch that again.
oh, it's like we have to. Okay, I think we've achieved the space. We hope we've created the actual space rather than the absolute space where it may start to be possible for us to talk properly about the reality that we actually inhabit as opposed to that fantasy version of the scientists. Yes?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Guys, you've got to tell everybody about our magnificent streams that we've done these 3 now that hopefully will take this takes time. This is worth getting into, right? You got to reimagine your entire reality and we're trying to help you with that. Tell your friends, bring them along to the chat. Subscribe because we want to get this conversation going. We want to have the joy of our incarnate reality shared with everyone on the internet here, and then we all go outside and take our dogs out to hang out under the trees. Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Good night.